What's going on, everybody, and welcome on into the React. And I know I'm not the normal person that welcomes you into the React because our buddy Brad Ward has decided to take a vacation. He is in deep trouble about it. We know you're going to miss him dearly here tonight, but at least you guys got Pete Smith, my buddy Pete Smith here, ready to hold it down. Joining you tonight, I am Michael Keefe from the Garage Beers podcast, which is happening in 2 hours. Right here on the OBR streaming network. But for right now, you got me on the React, where Pete and I are going to look around, see what some people are saying about our Cleveland Browns, and we're going to react to that. So, Pete, what's going on, buddy? Thanks for having me on with you here on the React.
Well, this starts your aggressive siege of Tuesdays, but Brad taking an indefinite leave of absence, indefinite in that I don't remember when he told me he'd be back, but he should be back for next week. But other than that, yeah, I mean, there's plenty going on. We wanted to keep it going, so plenty to talk about.
Yeah, plenty to talk about. Obviously, the Browns still out in West Virginia at the Greenbrier, getting ready to wrap that up and head back to Berea, where I know the fans here in Cleveland are clamoring to get out there to see some of their favorite players and some of the new players that'll be joining the Cleveland Browns. Again, we're going to hear from somebody out in the Greenbrier. We're going to hear from Mike Vrabel in just a little bit. We're going to hear a real interesting, I thought, conversation that was had with Micah Parsons and Ceedee Lamb from the Cowboys that brought up one of our Cleveland Browns. I want to hear what you have to say about that, Pete. Plus, Rich Eisen, who hasn't had a lot of positive things to say about the Cleveland Browns, had a Browns-related segment. We're going to get into that. Again, if you're joining us on YouTube or Twitch, make sure you smash that like button, hit subscribe, and tell your friends here on the React every Tuesday night. Well, it's going to move. The React is going to move. When is it moving, Pete? I don't even remember. Should we even announce that yet?
It's going to eventually move to Wednesdays since, like I said, you're going to eventually invade and completely ransack Tuesdays. But I'm not sure when that's going to happen. It's probably going to be basically when you're ready to go. So when we get
the
up,
doghouse will be back. So you guys can all just hang out with me on Tuesday nights. We're going to bring the doghouse back to preview the upcoming Browns games. But again, here on the React, it's not going anywhere. It's just going to move nights on the OBR streaming network. Speaking of the OBR, get over to the OBR.com and hit subscribe over there, where the OBR gives you the best Cleveland Browns coverage. It's the oldest and largest independent Cleveland Browns site in the city of Cleveland. So make sure you hit subscribe so you can read what guys like Pete are writing on a daily basis, as well as the rest of our amazing crew. And make sure, again, you're hitting like and subscribe. So, Pete, man, just real quick before we get into some of the videos and get into reacting to what's going on with what people are saying about the Cleveland Browns, the Browns are coming up to the end of their time out there at the Greenbrier. It's something they really, really liked last year. It's something they felt really had a positive effect culturally, I think, on the organization, as well as just getting them focused and ready for the season. I don't know. What are your impressions about the Greenbrier trip this year? Are you feeling like it's kind of the same situation? And for you, I think, even as interestingly as that is, for you as a guy with a coaching background, I mean, any little advantage you can get as a coach, you're looking for, right? So if you feel like this gives you a leg up somehow, if it gives you a little edge somehow, it's a great thing, right?
Yeah, from that point, I mean, look, the biggest draw for a coach going to this type of situation is where all your players are all the time. They can't leave. They can't go anywhere else. They're limited in the things they can get into that are, potentially problematic, whether it's their fault or not. That is always helpful. Certainly there is a, building aspect in terms of relationships, building the culture and all those things. And the Browns cited that as being important. Certainly it sort of built into the mythology of last year and being able to be resilient and get through some of the things they talked about, being able to play for the guy next to them and all this other stuff, which is certainly useful. I think my biggest impression in general this year is just how confidently the Browns are slow playing guys in. Myles Garrett being a good example, but certainly when we're talking about Jedrick Wills and Jack Conklin and a lot of these guys, they seemingly are taking a deliberate approach to not rush guys, because what we've talked about in past years, and a lot of teams run into this, is those soft tissue injuries. And Myles Garrett had a hamstring, that he suffered at the very end of the mini camp, and he's fine, but they're still not trying to rush him trying to take care of all these things. And I think in some ways that reflects a team that understands what this season's about. It's certainly the Dallas Cowboys week 1 is a huge game, huge opportunity, but they have bigger ambitions than that. They want to be able to keep these guys going for the length and breadth of the season, to keep these guys effective. And you can do that when you've got enough depth on your roster to be able to still get the stuff done you need to get done. Unlike past years, there aren't as many jobs up for available. Certainly there's competition. Certainly there are undrafted rookies that are going to try to make this team. And we've seen in the past couple of years that undrafted rookies just have found their ways to earn a roster spot, which is certainly important and valuable. But like, you know, when you get to about 40 guys, you're sort of like, yeah, these guys are going to make the roster. We sort of know that's going to go. So keep them healthy, do what we need to do without, you know, overextending or getting these guys in injury situations or whatever, because obviously we've already come back to this and found out Greg Newsome had to have surgery. Dalvin Tomlinson had to have a knee scope. So they're going to try to manage this as much as possible. And, you know, 17-game season, just how long that is. It always feels like the first couple of games are a sprint, and then you quickly realize just how long the season is. You got to be able to stay healthy and stay effective the whole way. The Browns dealt with an unconscionable amount of injuries last year. We're able to get through it, but unfortunately, we sort of knew where this thing was going to go in the postseason. We were all hoping, talking ourselves into this fairy tale thing, but you got to have your dudes ready to go, and you sort of got to the Final Four, the championship games. You're like, wow, those are really good teams. The Browns were not at this level yet, and they need to be healthier to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think it's, I think this thing, before, and we'll kick it off with somebody out in the Greenbrier when we get to our videos here in a minute, but I think it's interesting, Pete, that I was not anticipating last year the Greenbrier experiment to have as many positive reviews and positive things said about it as what wound up happening. I was expecting the fans to be furious about it, which they weren't. I was expecting to hear things from the players because you're taking them out into the middle of West Virginia and you're sitting on a field where there's, like you said, it's got to be great as a coach because your players, they got nowhere to go. You know where they are because there's nowhere to go. And you don't want to be wandering off out into the middle of nowhere. So I expected to hear some people say, and it's kind of an older place. Like, we don't want to do that. We're not going to go back. And instead it just over and over and over again, it was just glaring positive review after positive review to the point where they extended it a couple days longer this year than they did last year. So again, I wouldn't be surprised. And maybe they've dug into it a little deeper than what I know, Pete, but I wouldn't be surprised if they give a pretty good amount of credit. Not in a wild way. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they're like going to give credit to their whole season for what they did at the Greenbrier last year. But I certainly think that this is something that they just envision being part of the program moving forward. Well,
from the fan standpoint, frankly, I think they should be annoyed because it's an excuse not to have more open training. Like, I think it's crap that there are 6 open training camp days. Like, I'll just be honest. I think that's unfortunate for fans that, this is one of those free opportunities to go see your team. It's a great experience for kids to be able to get up close, see these giant guys and all this stuff. I do find that to be a little weak to me, but ultimately from the player standpoint, they have to be willing to buy in to do this because to your point, I'll just look at the defensive line. Like, most of the defensive linemen have 3 kids each. So like, you are willing to say, and maybe for them, they're like, yeah, let's get out of here. I get away from that. But I do think you have to be willing because these are young, guys in their 30s who are saying, yeah, I'm willing to do this, because it would be very easy for them to be like, I'm not interested in doing this. And you have to have it. You could have maybe you get away with this for a year, but the players had to buy into this to go back. They had to be willing to say, go to Coach Stefanski and the organization and say, yes, this had a tangible benefit. We feel like this got us better prepared, because I don't think you go back twice in a row if they aren't willing to, if they don't believe it had impact, that it didn't help them, because you deal with this with kids or college kids, and you're sort of like, okay, yeah, I mean, I get it to a point, but like, these are grown ass men with like real lives and everything else. They're sort of like, this is my job. I don't need to be like going on a camp out for work. You know what I mean? Like, So that part I do find very significant, that the players are saying, no, this was good for us. We felt like this gave us an edge. And whether it did or didn't, they believe it did. And there is some sort of, I do think there is a real benefit, but even if you believe it from a placebo standpoint, if you believe it worked, great. I mean, there is some element of just buying in and believing stuff that worked last year and doing it again. So we'll see if it works again, but they believe it. So I'm not going to argue with them.
Hey, real quick, I want to send it to our first video here on the React. Again, if you're with us on YouTube or Twitch, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you're following along with the OBR. Because again, right now, even still through this whole offseason, the OBR 4 nights a week of shows. And as we get into the season, we've got, I mean, we're going to have a few nights with multiple shows going on the OBR. I know we said something about maybe going to Wednesday. Don't worry. Barry and Fred are not going anywhere. OBR Weekly, it's anchored in. I saw somebody comment on that before. But I do want to give a couple shout outs. Manimal, 1955, subscribed 30 months in a row. Feels like you've been with us longer, Manimal. And Pat Shea, our buddy Pat Shea, 36 months. That's a happy 3-year anniversary to Pat Shea, 36 months in a row. Shout out to Pat Shea over on Twitch and Manimal. Shout out to you guys for subscribing. So, first video we're going to bring up is from the Greenbrier, and I think we can have an interesting conversation. We're going to play some bits and pieces of this press conference, but Mike Vrabel, former head coach of the Tennessee Titans, Super Bowl champion, former Ohio State Buckeye, again, now as part of the staff here for the Cleveland Browns. Mike Vrabel got up in front of the reporters at the Greenbrier. Let's hear a couple of things he had to say.
It's been like, we see you everywhere on the field. Sometimes you're running with Jameis, sometimes you're blocking with David, sometimes you're running scout team linebackers. What's this experience been like for these past couple months?
Well, it's been amazing to be able to get back on the field and coach and try to help where I can, and most importantly, learn. Be a part of a great staff with some really great veteran coaches, with some really great young and up and coming coaches. So wherever I can help, I'm more than willing to try to do that.
And when Andrew and Kevin kind of reached out to you about this option, Andrew was saying that he didn't think that you would even be up for it. I'm sure you had other opportunities. Maybe you could have taken your awesome time with your family. What felt right about this opportunity?
Well, I think that one, have a lot of respect for this organization, what Jimmy and Dee have done. I have a ton of respect for Andrew and Kevin and what they've been able to do in a short amount of time. And I trust them. I trust them that they would do right by me, and that they would help me, and that the position and the fit would be beneficial to everybody.
Mike. Let's just pause right there. Just the first couple questions, Pete, because that has been, it's been fun. I think I know kind of where your head's at with Mike Vrabel as far as what he's doing and being out in front of the microphones and all that, but it does feel like he's just been out there. I don't know that there's like a defined role that you've been able to see with Mike Vrabel yet, other than just be a guy who pulls guys aside in practice and does things with them. But to have a guy like Mike Vrabel, who is such a big name in the state of Ohio, obviously, such a successful player in the NFL, and then a guy who was a really good coach for the Tennessee Titans, and they decided to go a different direction. Just, hearing him talk about what it's been like to come back and why he came back. Just give us your thoughts on what you heard from Vrabel there.
Well, I think first and foremost, it says something about Kevin Stefanski and the Browns organization that people are excited to work for them. They have enough of a reputation that people seemingly come here, work for these guys, and are not, don't leave unhappy for the most part. Guys get fired and all that, but there doesn't seem to be bad blood. Guys seem to feel like they are valued in this organization, that their voice counts for something, which is how you're able to recruit some of the assistants they've been able to get, Jim Schwartz notably, but some of the offensive coaches they've hired, which I think is certainly a positive. I think a big part of this for Mike Vrabel and why you want to be involved in this type of situation, one, he gets to go home, which is nice, and all those things. So I think it gives him probably a much better work-life balance. So he gets to be involved in football. He gets to, go home in a normal hour. but he's engaged. And that's such a big part is you want to be out there. So, everybody expects that Mike Vrabel's going to be a head coach again next year. And part of that is because he's out there. And I think, look, I think first and foremost, the media really wanted him to talk, but I'm sure Mike Vrabel doesn't hate the fact he's out there talking because there are other teams and owners who are seeing him out there talking, which is always helpful. But like what I'm sort of reminded of with Mike Vrabel is a lot like what I heard from Chip Kelly when he made the switch from going the head coach at UCLA to the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. Is he is in describing his situation at Ohio State, he loves his job because he gets to coach players. And as the head coach, you are such a management setup. You are delegating and organizing, and you have such a big picture view that Chip Kelly felt like he was never getting to actually work with players. So I think part of the reason Vrabel is sort of jumping on this opportunity, if it's racing Jameis Winston or all this other stuff, or working with David Njoku individually, like he's having fun just being able to coach individual players. I think that he not have, particularly on the field, not having a real responsibility sort of allows him to just have fun and work with guys. But I've always just, in terms of what his overall role is, I've always described him as sort of game theory. He's working with guys on like the new kickoff rules. He's working with, I assume a lot of what he's doing is operating sort of a defensive coordinator against the scheme that Ken Dorsey is installing with Kevin Stefanski and sort of saying, this is what I would do to this. And then them being able to now go back and go, okay, this is how we need to adjust to it. Or the other thing would be if Mike Vrabel's operating in sort of that DC role and him saying to them, this is what gives me problems. These type of looks or those type of things are just super valuable. And yes, because he has a relationship with Jim Schwartz, yeah, he can talk about, we keep listening and hearing about fastballs and curve changeups and all this stuff. He may have some thoughts on what he did because Mike Vrabel's defense was not what Jim Schwartz did when Jim Schwartz was a consultant. It's very different. So he may have some ideas on what some of those changeups and stuff look like. But ultimately, to me, it really looks like Mike Vrabel is just like a coaching fantasy camp where he just gets to go have fun and do whatever he wants, which he seems to be loving, and it's great. So it's working for everybody. I initially didn't think he'd be on the field with players, but it's interesting to me that the Browns are just like, yeah, go do what you want, basically. And he's loving every minute of it, which is great. Everybody seems to be saying that they feel like he brings real value. It certainly says something to Kevin Stefanski and these other people because almost immediately when he was hired, everybody's well, Mike Vrabel is going to take over the head coaching job. And it says something that Kevin Stefanski does not operate from he does not live in his fears, so to speak, in terms of, I feel like I can hire a really good coach. I don't fear that all of a sudden people are going to try to give him my job. I'm comfortable in my skin. I understand what I'm doing. I'm going to coach the way I coach, and we're going to get the best thing out of this. So it's just adding more people into the building that are really smart and should ultimately provide a net benefit, which is ultimately what you want. Now, it may only last a year, but he's learning from them. They're learning from him. Great. It's a perfect setup, and it's something the Browns have done. I expect they will continue to do it. It's just Mike Vrabel just happens to be the biggest name of people they've done this with.
Well, Kevin Stefanski, I think rightfully has earned the ability to walk around with a little, let's call it BD energy, with a couple Coach of the Year awards in his pocket. And I think he's at a point with this organization where I think we talk a lot about hot seats with coaches, but I think Kevin Stefanski is at a point with this organization that he can feel comfortable and say, yeah, we can bring in Mike Vrabel, and I don't care what he does. I hope he just comes in and just helps us be better. And maybe Mike Vrabel will be better at something than I am from a coach perspective.
Yeah, exactly right. I agree 100%.
He ain't going to take my job. My job's good. Mike might go find another job, which Andrew Berry alluded to in his press conference. Mike will go find another job, but he's not taking my job here. He can just come be a part of the process and part of the program and try to help us win a Super Bowl. I think it's, like you said, I think it's amazing. And I did want to shout out our buddy Casey Kinnaman, OBR brethren here, one of our newest OBR folks. that you can hear and read and all that with the OBR. But he also did not anticipate Mike Vrabel mixing it up on the practice field as much as he is. Yeah, he's out there getting his hands dirty and working with the players. He's running sprints with Jameis Winston. I love that video.
We'll see how long till he ends up in a walking boot. But it just speaks to the fact that Kevin Stefanski is relentlessly competitive in terms of, we talk about, well, the Browns are sort of sitting on their hands or being worried that why do we get rid of Alex Van Pelt? Well, look, he's sitting here going, I want to get better every year. If I can upgrade my coaching staff, I'm going to upgrade my coaching staff. And Mike Vrabel is an upgrade in terms of what he can offer. And that's just being super competitive. He has an advantage that no one else has, and it's going to make them better as a football team. So that is always how I viewed Kevin Stefanski. He's just insanely competitive for all the right reasons that, people are talking about standards and, well, the Browns need to make the playoffs this year. Well, Kevin Stefanski is saying, you're right. We weren't as good. We do need to be better. This is how I'm going to get better, by doing everything I possibly can to upgrade this team. And that doesn't just mean players. That means coaches as well.
Casey says gravitas, which confused some people in the comments section over on YouTube. But gravitas without pride. And that's awesome. Let's go back to Vrabel for a little bit and just listen to a little bit more of what he had to say in his press conference.
Hands on with tight ends all off season and here. Why that position group?
Well, I think that's my role. That's what it's been asked of me from the head coach, from Kevin. He felt like that would be the best place to be, and so tried to absolutely embrace that and get to know those players on a personal level and then a professional level, and and help Tommy and Nemo where I can.
Special teams also.
Well, I think that's an easy transition for me. That's something that I've always been a part of, and I have history with Bubba. We were teammates, and what he's been able to do, transitioning from a player to a coach, to be able to help him and Bravo where I can. I've played some of those positions, helped coach some of those positions, so that's been something that's been pretty easy.
Your races with Jameis have been a big highlight and a hit on camp. So tell us how those got started and how are they going?
I think the quarterbacks, to their credit, they're not trying to waste any time or waste any reps, and so we do the routes on air, and after the last ball's thrown, they started taking off in off season, and I thought, well, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to get these old bones moving, and then so now we just try to have a little bit of fun with it, and certainly those guys are trying to get their work in and focus on the timing with the receivers, but then also they're not wasting a rep, and they're taking advantage of getting their conditioning in, and also getting back down to the other side to where we can get going again.
Pete, one thing that stands out to me when I listen to just all the questions that come in about Mike Vrabel, but really when you think about Mike Vrabel's history as not just a coach, but a player, man, the way he operates does just fit right in with what this organization likes. We talk about it a lot when it comes to the draft and the type of players they draft and the type of players they sign in free agency. And frankly, the type of players they really seem to value as far as contracts and all that. The word, I think when he was a player, Pete, the word that you would use to describe Mike Vrabel is versatile. Mike Vrabel, he was a defender. He was a tight end. He was on special teams. He did a little bit of everything. And I think it's part of why he can be such a good, well-respected coach is a guy that can have his word and his opinion thrown in to every single piece of what they are doing out there. And he's got the experience to back it up.
Yeah, the fact that he's working specifically with tight ends is really interesting because that wasn't something we knew about other than the fact that it seemed like he just enjoyed hanging out with David Njoku, who, yeah, I would too. But the fact that it's not – he obviously has a resume that speaks for itself in terms of what he's done in the coaching ranks, but he has played tight end, to your point. He has defended against tight ends. So he has sort of that – understanding of how to sort of work angles and leverages and those type of things that can be beneficial. But he's also not the first coach that I've ever heard use practice as part of their fitness/diet in terms of using running and all this other stuff to do that. So that part's also interesting. But yeah, look, anything to get a little juice, going, get these guys competing, a little extra something that gets guys doing just 1% more or going a little harder, even if it's just to sort of prove this old guy wrong or make him look bad or whatever. All that stuff can work. And the fact that Mike Vrabel is sort of, I don't know if I would say humble himself, but just sort of isn't afraid to get in there and get his hands dirty a little bit. And like I said, I think that is fun for him. I think it's probably been a minute since he's been able to really do that. And I'm sure he did that occasionally with the Titans when he was their head coach, but like he had to do the things a head coach does, and he gets to sort of play around and focus on these things. I think it could be really good for David Njoku. I really like it from the standpoint of, I don't know what Tommy Rees's like experience with tight ends before this. Obviously, he's former quarterback, has been a coordinator multiple places, but like that's got to be hugely valuable and a huge draw for Tommy Rees, who sort of was hired by the Browns as like this great opportunity to get a nice young mind who just came from the collegiate ranks, which I've talked about, I think is super valuable in terms of just being able to sort of teach and reach kids who like are coming in the NFL. You sort of get that little bit of a generational gap, whether it's recruiting these guys or just being able to relate to them or whatever. Like that stuff's super important, build that rapport, and then being able to learn from a very qualified head coach, because ultimately this seems like that's where Tommy Rees wants to go, is really valuable. And it's just one more thing that just enhances the experience for these guys. You've got a lot of, we haven't been talking about the Browns in terms of guys you look on the coaching staff, you go, where you looked at the past few years, you're like, that guy's going to be a head coach. The Browns have not had a lot of those guys. And now it seems like they've got some guys that are in that. I mean, I think the last guy the Browns had where you're like, I remember players talking about him, that guy's going to be a future head coach, was O'Connell, who's now with the Vikings. I think there are going to be more guys on this coaching staff where they're going to be like, that guy's going to be a head coach, or that guy's going to be a coordinator, or whatever it is, which I think is good. You want guys to have a little ambition because they're trying to do a little extra to get better, trying to learn from their peers as much as they can. And I do think Vrabel is going to provide a value for those younger guys, like Tommy Rees, like the running game coordinator from UConn, whose name escapes me at this moment, who I really like, Nick Charlton.
Yeah.
I really like them hiring these guys, and I love the fact that they have this guy in Mike Vrabel, who can sort of is one more person that can sort of be a mentor for these young coaches coming into this.
Well, like I said, last thing on Mike Vrabel is that this certainly is not something, if you are a Browns fan, you should get used to for very long. Andrew Berry came out in his press conference and alluded to the fact that this is probably a one-year thing. This is probably a thing for Mike Vrabel to say, hey, listen. And I think his situation is really interesting because Mike Vrabel, I don't know that anybody would say that he wasn't successful. Mike Vrabel had to deal with some crap in Tennessee, and he always seemed to have his guys ready, and that team always played hard, especially defensively. Tennessee, always under Vrabel, always a pretty darn good football team. So it's not like he comes out of that. Frankly, you could say, hey, if Mike Vrabel wanted to take a year off, I don't think it would taint his reputation at all. He doesn't come out feeling like a failed head coach, and he's going to be a name that's in demand for jobs. But for them to come out and get him out here to do this, Andrew Berry said, yeah, it's going to be fun. It'll be a cool thing for 1 year. We're going to get as much as we can from him, and we'll hope our guys can absorb as much as they can, and whatever he'll give us is great. But I would not anticipate seeing Mike Vrabel back at the Greenbrier next year.
No, and my expectation is that whether it's Catherine Raish or Cook, I think one of those guys is going to end up going with him when he goes to his next job and be the GM. I think that's part of why he's here, is to build a relationship. He wants to get a better understanding of the analytics part of it. That was something that hurt them in Tennessee with the GM they had there. He didn't mesh seemingly with the guy they had hired. Was it Rand Carthon, who's the new GM at the Titans? Yep. So that's part of it. The other thing that has hurt Mike Vrabel and I think is part of the reason he's not there is lack of success at the quarterback position, lack of ability to develop the quarterback position. And certainly Kevin Stefanski has a lot of experience with that and being able to help along that. It wouldn't shock me if Jameis Winston went with Mike Vrabel, for example, and who knows, maybe that's why they're racing. But like, I it's a very mutual beneficial thing. Like one of the things that Mike Vrabel has always done really well is he's come up with really creative game management things with like taking weird like penalties that seem weird at the time, or there have just been kooky stuff that ended up giving them an advantage and helping them win football games. Like I think Mike Vrabel, relative to the talent he had a lot of the years, overachieved. Like you came back looking at that roster and like that team won the division, or that team was able to get in the postseason.
The quarterback was Ryan Tannehill.
Well, yeah, and then
Sorry,
I think that's a big part of it. So like if he can come out of this going, I've got a better understanding of how, what I need to find either in myself to coach quarterbacks or to hire somebody to coach quarterbacks, which could be something else he takes with him, or being better at understanding what he needs to find in a GM and understanding why they're doing things the way they are in terms of the analytics piece, in addition to what he can identify in terms of, the toughness and the grit and those type of things that you can't necessarily evaluate with numbers and all these other things, then he comes out of this really well. And I think there are things that he's ultimately going to be able to teach the Browns those same things. Maybe it's toughness and grit and being able to why is he able to get these guys that maybe not have these, the speed, the height, weight, speed type things, and able to get them to play good football, like those type of things. It's a really mutually beneficial setup. But like I said, or like you said, he'll be gone after a year. He'll be hired by somebody else. And if the Browns are I think if the Browns are good, it will only help him more. The only people who are bummed about Mike Vrabel being here are Ohio State fans, because this almost entirely ensures, which I don't blame him, he has no interest in going back to college because he doesn't want to deal with the recruiting piece. He just wants to coach and do that part. And college is increasingly a nightmare on that front until they fix certain things in the recruiting process and transfer portal and all that stuff. I don't think he wants to deal with it. And I think that part of it is a bummer for people who are hoping that somehow Ryan Day is going, either wins the national championship or is replaced, and Mike Vrabel is going to be eager to jump down to Columbus to take that job. I don't think that's realistic. I don't think he's even considering that. I think he's waiting for his NFL job, open up, and then go take one of these assistant GMs with him, maybe take a coach or a few with him, and then roll it wherever the new location is. And then next year, depending on where that job is, would not shock me in the least if they have joint practices.
Yeah, I 100%. And again, I think it's cool. Sorry for the Buckeye fans. I was one of those guys. I thought that job was going to be tailor-made, but the more college football goes the way it goes, the more you're going to see what you see with Mike Vrabel just waiting for that next NFL job. Anyways, again, you're watching the React here on the OBR streaming network, whether you are on Twitter over on X, what's up? We're glad you're here. Or whether you're on Twitch or YouTube, make sure you hit that like, follow, subscribe button. Tell your friends, make sure they join in as the React right now every Tuesday at 7 p.m. You can tune in. All right, I want to switch gears here. A lot of this offseason, and frankly, Pete, I know you guys have talked about it too, and you guys have done a phenomenal job making the React such an enjoyable experience. And I can say that because I'm not on it all the time, so it's genuine. There's not been, like, we spent a lot of time this offseason talking about things that maybe, like, we're talking about, like, the national perspective of the Browns and different viewpoints on what they're going to do, and why does everybody think the Browns are going to be worse this year than they were last year. And we spent a lot of time on that. Well, a familiar name who has said a lot of things about the Browns, especially after the Deshaun Watson signing, threw his name into the hat as far as some predictions for some certain Browns players. And that's the next thing we're going to get into, as Rich Eisen and his show had some stuff to say about the Browns. So let's switch gears and let's hear what Rich Eisen and crew had to say about the Browns.
K. Cabot wanted to put it out there. You talked about Nick Chubb as your top 5 comeback player of the year players. Yep. Obviously coming back from that devastating knee injury from last season. She said, just watch Nick Chubb running full sprints after practice, cutting with tremendous agility. It was remarkable. We weren't allowed to film it, but Jimmy Haslam, Browns owner, watched the whole thing and looked very pleased. So it appeared, and we saw the video, what was it, last week, 2 weeks ago, of him squatting like 8,000 pounds, it seemed like. Feels like Nick Chubb is all the way back.
Let's go.
That's awesome.
Let's go. Great news.
Yeah,
Great news. And that's what more needs to be said, other than the fact that if this guy comes back, not only is it something that he deserves, but I'm sure earned with hard work and blood, sweat, tears that we were not privy to. And again, what we saw last year from their running game without him will only serve to make them stronger down the depth chart this year and maybe ease them in back sooner and early. But we all know, Chris, what it's about. We all know it's about Deshaun Watson.
Yep.
And
100%.
can the Watson that caused the Browns to acquire him despite his off-field baggage and giving him the guaranteed contract that apparently was necessary to get him to change whatever other plans he may have had when he was up for grabs and other teams were interested in him, and wind up in Cleveland. Can that Deshaun Watson show up and show out? He did, I would say, in Baltimore last year when he balled out in that win the Cleveland Browns had in Baltimore that shocked a lot of people, just A, by happening, and then B, the news happened to, began to seep out afterwards. Oh, yeah. He suffered a significant shoulder injury that is going to cause him to miss the rest of the season. It's just like, wait a minute, that guy who is running and throwing and was the typical quintessential Deshaun Watson, that guy, the one I will never forget the first Thursday night game of his career. It was the first game of his career, if I'm not mistaken, his first start of his career. And for the Houston Texans, and we were in Cincinnati, and the Texans were starting him, even though Bill O'Brien started him. If I'm not mistaken, Chris, you want to look this up? I shouldn't be trying to jog my memory when I'm a little bit COVID hazy right now, but if I'm not mistaken, Tom Savage started the year for the Texans for some reason, and then Deshaun Watson started the next game, which was a Thursday night football game in Cincinnati, and they had no tight ends, and they didn't have any I think some tight ends were playing tackle or something.
Didn't
crazy.
he have like a 60-yard touchdown run or something?
And then he ran one in from midfield.
Yeah,
he was having trouble, operating the offense as one would think a rookie would do, in a short week and not having a banged up offense up front in front of him. But he ran one in from midfield.
Yeah, he had a 49-yard touchdown run.
It was breathtaking.
Yep.
We were sitting there on Thursday night
like,
on NFL Network.
Who is this guy?
Exactly. Well, I mean, it was just like, that's the kid.
Yep.
That's the kid. And at the time, for real, people were like, why would the Chiefs not trade up to take him and take the kid from Texas Tech at the time? I'm telling you, at that point in time in life, people were like, why would the Chiefs? Because this is the guy I would think that Reed would want to have. Is like, this is a guy that has a McNabb type game. He went with the guy who has a Favre type game and a McNabb type game together. But long story short here is it's about Deshaun Watson and can he return to form? And they wisely got Amari Cooper situated contractually to his satisfaction. And if the Njoku that was balling out with comeback player of the year Joe Flacco shows up this year, and Nick Chubb can do what he can do, sky's the limit for Cleveland. 100%. Division winner, going deep in the playoffs. If Watson shows up like that, Myles Garrett is grim reaping and crossover dribbling and all that. No doubt.
Catch the Rich. Let me unmute myself. There's Rich Eisen from the Rich Eisen Show. It's about as positive as I've heard him about the Browns in a long time. It gets a little old, Pete, because the conversation just always goes back to the same thing. But I also think it's a compliment to what Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski and this Browns organization from top to bottom have done with this roster, in that he's not wrong. The everybody that keeps saying, and again, it's old and it's boring to say because there's not a lot of nuance and there's not a lot of depth to it. But everybody that says, Pete, that this all is just going to depend on Deshaun Watson. Like they started talking about Nick Chubb, and he was like, yeah, that's awesome. I love to hear that. But this all is just going to depend on Deshaun. It's a testament to what they've built because it's the truth. The roster's ready to be a Super Bowl roster. The roster is ready to be a Super Bowl roster. They have to get the quarterback play.
Yeah, I mean, there's no getting away from that. Nick Chubb's got it. Be done with DC. It's Marvel time. You're a mutant. It's over. Stop it. Wolverine. Let's go. I have long been saying I thought late in the season, ramp up for the playoffs. That was going to be it. And I don't know that he's going to be ready for week 1, but I'm not going to guess anymore, because if he's actually sprinting and cutting, like, those are the tests that are going to matter for him being viable. And he's doing that in the end of July, which is weird because, like, there's been talk that he's been quietly ahead of schedule, and then he himself is thinking he's behind schedule. And if that is behind schedule, I don't know what his schedule is in his head, but it's just freakish. And if he's ready to go, yeah, like, there's no getting away from how important Deshaun Watson is and everything he goes. But, like, if Nick Chubb is back and, like, better, you know, because here again, it be done with Batman. Dark Knight Rises. He's a husk at that point. He's broken down. You clearly are not. You clearly have like at this point, are we going to get to a spot in the conversation where, like, no, Nick Chubb is somehow better for having this horrific knee injury, and he's upgraded beyond this? Like, this is where I think this conversation is going to end up going, because we are constantly blown away by what he's able to do, which is, one, he's got tremendous genetics, but obviously he is working his butt off to get back to this. Like, he is doing everything possible. And, like, as much as you hate this, he is like, JC Treader used to be this guy. He's the no excuses guy. If Nick Chubb is working this hard, you can't be like, I don't know, I'm not feeling it today. You can't be like, I don't know, my ankle's a little tired today. I don't know if I can go. Like, Nick Chubb removes all excuses. You have to go, because this guy is just crushing it in there. But if he's back, if he's really back, Deshaun Watson, yes, he needs to be good. He needs to be, like, ready to go week 1. But if Chubb is back, like, it takes some of the pressure off of Watson. Like, I've been talking about all offseason. One, and Andrew Berry sort of, you know, said the same thing. He's just got to stay on the field, and it will take care of himself. But I think in part because he was constantly this in and out, that Deshaun Watson would come in, and instead of just letting the game come to him and just play and take the profit and keep drives going, it felt like so often he was trying to make every throw into a $230 million throw. That every throw, he was trying to justify the whole contract right now. He's trying to make 14-point throws in a game where you can get no more than 7. And to me, I felt like the Ravens game, like, because I've heard this as sort of a knock on him. Well, these throws were easy, this, that, and the other. If that's all it takes, just get the ball to your playmakers. If you have a defense that is this good, you don't need to do these things. Just don't do harm to your own team. If Nick Chubb is back and he's able to run the ball, it takes more pressure off. Just stay in the game, get comfortable, and it will come back to you, and we'll get to it. Because every time he played, it was he got better, and then all of a sudden he got hurt. And then he got better in that Ravens game, and all of a sudden he got hurt. And we were sort of building to something, and then it got stopped. And the numbers are ugly. There's no getting away from the fact that the numbers are, like, hideous if you look at it from the whole standpoint. But just watching him play, it just felt like he was getting better, and then we sort of reset the clock. So if he does these things, I think we'll be fine. And I don't care if he gets back to 2020. I just need to be a good 2024, 2025 quarterback that can guide you to the playoffs. And particularly when we get to, like, I think it's like the last 6-7 games where it's a really difficult part of the schedule. Now is the point where I need Deshaun Watson to be whatever he is, to be at a higher level, to be able to now start making some of those plays. I don't need $230 million throws until I need one. Like, the Ravens game is the one that always stands out to me. Like, it was a bunch of dump offs until he had to make that pinpoint throw to Amari Cooper settling in space, and that where he's going to the ground, and that ball is the only place it can be. And it's a phenomenal throw. That's a $230 million throw. I need, like, one of those a game. I need the other stuff to just take care of the football, get it to your playmakers. You have Amari Cooper and David Njoku, and hopefully Jerry Jeudy's ready to take that next step, and Elijah Moore and Cedric Tillman. We get tired of, like, talking about all these weapons he's got to have. Hopefully this is, you know, he's imbibing this to a certain extent. Like, when I listened to Deshaun Watson's press conference, which I know he took a lot of heat for, what I am hearing is what he's telling his therapist, or the therapist is telling him, in terms of, like, I've got to block out the BS and all this other stuff. And for what it's worth, I understand why people get mad at this and go, well, you brought it on yourself. I'm not going to argue that. But I also understand where Deshaun Watson's coming from and why he's trying to say these things. and particularly the point that stood out to me is, which I knew was always the case, and we sort of ran into this with LeBron. He likes being liked, and it's been very difficult for him to be hated, and that's not fun when you're doing that, because it takes me back to LeBron when, like, initially it was really fun to be the villain, and you got the whole NWO thing when they were the Miami Heat and all this other stuff, and then it did not take very long for him to be like, I don't like being the villain very much. I like being beloved. And Deshaun is sort of like talking through this in this press conference. Yeah. He's hammered for it. I get it. But I also sort of understand what he's saying and why he's talking the way he is. And hopefully this is what he's processing in terms of, I can't make people feel a certain way. I've just got to focus on me, do these other things. And that's the other reason I think he was trying to make these $230 million throws, because the thing that is painfully clear just through sports is that the only way for Deshaun Watson to sort of redeem himself in however you want to define that is to win, and not just win in Cleveland, the team that got him. Like, yes, there's a world where he could theoretically be offloaded to another team and then find some success, but everybody's going to hang this over his head that he was a failure in Cleveland. He's got to be good, and I think he put too much pressure on himself to be a superstar on every single play. And now he's just got to go out there, take what's there, take the profit, stay on the field, keep drives going, don't do no harm, and the other stuff will grow and come from that. And if he can do that, there may be 31 NFL cities and everybody else who hates him, but like, there will be enough Cleveland fans who are like, yes, finally, this is what we wanted. And even though you allegedly did these things, which I believe he did, but whatever, that they're still going to be, well, at least he's playing good, he's playing good football again. And we can at least enjoy that, because if you didn't quit the Browns when Deshaun Watson trade was happening, you are looking at this from the standpoint of, I have memories, I have family or whatever that predate this. Like, that my fandom is bigger than this one man, this person. I'm not going to let him take this from me. And ultimately, I still want my team to do well. So that is sort of how you get into that realm of justifying it. So it's, yes, 100%. Deshaun Watson needs to be good for this season to be successful. There's no doubting that. But what people get lost in this from the national perspective, with a few exceptions, is how good the rest of the roster is. And he doesn't need to be a hero every week. Tennessee, Arizona, these are perfect examples. Just function, and the stuff will take care of itself.
Pete, I do want to go back to the Chubb conversation first, but I want to take Nick Chubb out. Let's say they're going to kind of slow down with Nick Chubb. And yeah, he's running full speed and he's cutting and he's feeling great, but maybe the Browns are going to say, we're glad you're feeling great. We want you to really be feeling great when you make your season debut in week 5, because I think that is a possibility. Another piece of news that came out with the Nick Chubb conversation was also another running back the Browns signed this offseason with a massive knee injury, but who was also out running full speed and making cuts, and that was Nyheim Hines. Pete, going into this season, when you look at what the Browns had to deal with last year with the loss of Chubb and then the onus falling on Jerome Ford, second year back at the time, Kareem Hunt, and to an extent Pierre Strong throughout the course of the season. When you look at what the Browns have done just for the depth purposes of the running back room going into this season, let's say Nick Chubb's not ready, but maybe Nyheim Hines is ready to go. And maybe the Browns roll into this season with Jerome Ford and Dante Foreman and Nyheim Hines. Are you more confident in that group to give that spell and that respite to Deshaun Watson playing quarterback to make more plays than maybe, not to say anything bad about the guys last year, but do you think the room is built a little bit better this year to take some of the onus off the quarterback if Chubb can't go?
Definitely better than last year. I mean, last year was a catastrophe, and some of it was unavoidable. Like, I have given an unending amount of crap to Kareem Hunt, but like playing through a torn abductor sounds like absolute hell. Like, having sprained my abductor, it feels like you'd rather be dead. So the fact that he played like that is insane to me. But like, at the same time, it was a struggle. He had no juice left. Jerome Ford, I think, did a nice job for what he was doing. I think he got better as the season wore on. Yeah. But at the same point, the line got worse. So it was sort of a wash and those type of things. So I think Jerome Ford in a smaller role is going to be very good for him. I think I think they've got the Nyheim Hines is a weapon. Maybe he'll get some carries, but I think ultimately he's going to be more of a extra receiver and a matchup problem. But I am very high on Dante Foreman because he's just he's just the perfect power guy to just get behind your dudes and go. And if the Browns are true to who they say they're going to be or what we believe they're going to be, which is more spread out, and you've got limited guys in the box and a guy like Dante Foreman being able to just pound on them and over and being able to then use those receivers in space, and that combination will be deadly. I think Dante Foreman is a super underrated component in this offense. I think last year had like 2.75 yards after contact, and that was like a low year for him. Like he's a guy who's going to churn and gain extra yards. I think Deontay Foreman's going to take the power stuff that Kareem Hunt was doing, which that short yardage stuff, which to his credit, if you needed 2 yards, he was going to get you 2 yards. If you needed 6 yards, he was going to get you 2 yards. But like, I think Deontay Foreman gives you that, where I think Jerome Ford gives you, hopefully with more consistency this year, the passing component that Kareem Hunt was able to do when he was much healthier. So I do think they're going to be much better equipped this year, being able to take some off of Jerome Ford's plate. Let's say Chubb is on the PUP list for the first 4 weeks and he's out. I do feel good about Deontay Foreman and Jerome Ford and whatever Nyheim Hines can give you from that capacity. My bigger question at that point becomes what we hopefully is a rejuvenated Joel Bitonio who's healthy this year after last year going through hell with pain. I think as I've written, I've talked about, I think Wyatt Teller is the most important lineman on the team this year. I think the scheme is going to lean into him more. If Jack Conklin is healthy, that would be a huge boost. If they can stay steady up front and get back to being, they don't even have to be as good as they have been. They just got to be good enough where they don't have obvious weaknesses. Then I think that running game is going to be a lot better than last year. And yes, it will take pressure off of Watson. If we had this set up with the Browns last year, I think it would have taken a ton of pressure off Joe Flacco late in the year. I just think, we got into games where like you couldn't run the clock, or the playoff game, the Texans were like, you're not going to run. Who are you kidding? And then they just killed them in the passing game ultimately, even though Flacco was able to make plays and the Browns were able to get some stuff. Just not having any threat really on the ground just was a huge detriment to their offense. And I think they've done the things they need to do. If these guys stay healthy, if they need to go a couple games without Chubb, I think they'll be fine. Even if Chubb is sort of like, we're not going to give him 23 carries a game or whatever it is, we're going to give less. I think they are better equipped to sort of be able to not feel like if Chubb's out of the game, oh crap, what are we doing? I think they're going to be a little bit more comfortable in that, where in years past, you're like, Chubb's off the field, oh my God, what is this? Yeah.
Well, we will find out. Again, the news will continue to come down as training camp goes on about Nick Chubb and Nyheim Hines and this running situation. Pete, I got one more video, and this is a short one, but I thought it was really interesting. And I think if you asked me who's working his way into a guy that I really like that isn't a Cleveland athlete, so a guy from another team that I like, after everything was said and done with the Defensive Player of the Year vote last year and Myles Garrett getting it and all the conversation and all the butthurt Pittsburgh Steelers fans because they thought TJ Watt should get it because they don't understand there's more to life than sacks. There was Micah Parsons talking a lot of smack and giving his opinion, and Micah has taken that and he's turned it into a podcast, which is really good. It's called The Edge with Micah Parsons, and he had Ceedee Lamb on the podcast just recently, and they got into an interesting conversation, and it turned into a little bit of Browns news. So I'm going to play the clip, and then we can react to Micah Parsons and Ceedee Lamb.
On people who've covered you, who's your top 5 DBs that you like?
Sauce. I love playing against Pat Surtain. He's tough. Both of them, they're identical because they're young, they're very energetic, they're smart, and they're tall. You know what I'm saying? They know how to use their length. I don't really see man to man outside much, to be honest. You got Jalen Ramsey, of course, X. I've said that plenty of times. And Denzel Ward, he's a sleeper. Bro, it's nice. His technique is crazy. I watch a lot of film, you know what I'm saying? I watch on potential guys that's gonna guard me. I watch.
I mean, we play the Browns next year.
Exactly. And I watch how you move. I watch how you know, he does everything right, bro. He ain't gonna hold you. He gonna mirror you. I mean, at the receiver position, that's the best technique.
And he tackles.
And he tackles. And he's coming up to make a play. You're gonna feel him.
If you had to build your favorite receiver.
So a little, an interesting little clip that's got to have Browns fans feeling pretty excited about. We know what we've got, I think, in Denzel Ward. We love Denzel Ward here in Cleveland. I think we spend actually a lot of time here in Cleveland talking about the other guys because that's what a steady force we feel like Denzel Ward is, especially when he's healthy. That we spend more time talking about Greg Newsome and Martin Emerson and some of the other younger guys. And but to hear Micah Parsons, one of the best defenders in the game, and Ceedee Lamb, one of the best wide receivers in the game, call out Denzel Ward and then spend a little time talking about him. Denzel's a special player. If he can stay healthy, man, that's the viewpoint of Denzel Ward amongst players in the NFL. And it's pretty cool to hear him talk like that.
Well, interesting that Ceedee Lamb looks like Lope Dog from Don't Be a Menace to South Central while drinking juice in the hood. Denzel Ward doesn't talk. I mean, that's what it is. He's not loquacious. He's not a self-hype guy. He just goes out and plays. And when he's on, he's as good as it gets in terms of man coverage and being able to just do exactly what Ceedee Lamb's talking about. The problem, obviously, from a Browns standpoint, we end up sort of conflicted because you're sort of like, well, he's going to miss 4 games this year. You know, somehow, some way, calf or whatever, he's going to end up missing 4 games. But when he's good, I think there's a temptation to be like, well, the Browns have Greg Newsome and Martin Emerson, so they'll be fine. When he's playing at a high level, the Browns defense is significantly better. You can do so much with him. And I think the proof is he missed, I think, only 1 game that year, or the least he's ever missed. It's one of the years he's ended up in the Pro Bowl. But that year, it was Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, and like 9 guys named Fred. They were really bad in a lot of areas. Obviously, that was the year where the Browns had the Maliks and all these other guys, but they were living a lie at defensive tackle. But Denzel Ward was like lights out that year. Myles Garrett was obviously phenomenal, and it really elevated that defense. And then the following year, Myles Garrett has the car accident. Denzel Ward misses a bunch of time with injury. And all of a sudden, it laid bare to the fact that the Browns were missing a lot, particularly the defensive tackle position. That was really, really bad. But like suddenly when those guys weren't playing at the highest level, they were not sort of fixing it. And even in 2021, they ended up being like 15th or something overall in defense, which felt like an achievement given what they had. But it's a testament to just how good they were. So like I've sort of looked at the season. If Denzel Ward can stay healthy the whole year, that's the best chance for the Browns to repeat. Obviously, Myles Garrett would need to be healthy as well. But that is the best chance for the Browns to repeat as the number 1 defense in the league again. That is where I think the Browns have the most upside to get better. Because if he's fully functional the entire year, healthy, feeling good, the amount of ways you can leverage your coverage elsewhere, that you can just trust him to be like, no, I got this guy, and it's over. Those things are huge for you. And the Cincinnati Bengals are a good example in terms of just how good the Browns corners can be. And what Denzel Ward does to set the tone with being able to cover a guy like Jamar Chase, he's phenomenal. And again, part of this is because he doesn't talk. Everybody hears from Sauce Gardner from social media, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing. He will weigh in on everything. Sauce Gardner knows everything about like Twitch personalities. Like he will weigh in on all kinds of stuff. But you never hear that from Denzel Ward. He just doesn't talk. He's not a social media guy. He's not a guy that like he ever says anything that's particularly compelling or a great soundbite in his press availability. Like he's like the Kevin Stefanski-ist player on the team in terms of just saying nothing remarkable and just sort of staying with it and positive and all these other things. But like, that is sort of why I think Denzel Ward is a sleeper in his mind, because obviously if you just throw out corners, I think he will get forgotten in that conversation, even though he's really good, except for the people who are really, really paying attention. So they ask a lot of Denzel Ward. There's a lot put on his plate, a lot of responsibility. And yeah, it's got to be nice for him to be able to not have to say it himself, and for somebody like Ceedee Lamb to be the one who goes, yeah, Denzel Ward is really good. And this has come up before. Other receivers have talked about just how difficult he is to deal with because his feet are so good, because he reads routes so well, because he can mirror, because his athleticism is out of this world in terms of what he's able to do in movement skills. Just phenomenal corner.
Yeah, I thought the comments from Ceedee Lamb were really cool. Just to hear, especially a wide receiver talking about him. But then that little piece, I love that little piece from Micah Parsons too, because when Micah Parsons, again, one of the best defenders in the NFL, says, "Oh, he'll make you feel him too. He can hit." I think people forget that about Denzel Ward sometimes, and maybe the injuries and all that, but people forget Denzel Ward can lay a hit on you as well. And so he's not just quick, he's not just athletic, he's physical. And that's why he is the number one corner, one of the most important positions on the football field. He's the number one guy for a team that has one of the number one groups in the entire league. And to hear him get shouted out like that from some of his top level peers is pretty cool. So, Pete, man, I think that's going to do it for the React here. A couple of cool things to talk about. Again, we got the Browns still out at the Greenbrier for a few more days before they make their way back. Training camp, I think it's all sold out for the few days that it's there, but training camp will be back in Berea. We'll be talking preseason football before you know it. And it's just about time for us to get ready for Cleveland Browns football, games that mean something. And that is exciting. Pete, man, I appreciate you letting me tag on with you tonight. Again, I don't know what Brad's thinking going on vacation. I don't know why he thinks that's acceptable when he's got to host the React on Tuesday nights, but I appreciate you letting me jump on with you, buddy.
Yeah, I appreciate you jumping in. A lot of fun. Always happy to jump on and talk with you, whether it's this or post game or any of this stuff we do. But yeah, good stuff. And look, there's plenty going on. So tune into the OBR, turn into Garage Beers here momentarily. Certainly, that's been a fun listen with all the various guests you've been having lately. Somehow, some way, I imagine you'll have one of the guys, the Guardians got the trade deadline. I don't know how you'll do it, but we're
going to work on it. We've already sent our messages.
So yeah, turn into that. But yeah, there's a lot coming in terms of OBR programming. There could be some slight adjustments just to make it easier on certain people who have lives outside of this. But plenty of programming coming, plenty of content coming. So keep it locked in.
Awesome. Yeah, you heard the man. Get over to theobr.com and hit subscribe and read everything that Pete is writing, as well as the rest of our incredible staff. From those of us that have been around for a while to quite a few new people writing for us and contributing for the OBR as well. So it's an exciting time for the OBR. Make sure you're tuned into theobr.com and the OBR streaming network. Again, 4 nights a week throughout the entire offseason. We're going to be adding more shows. There's going to be some shifting around. And we're even going to go to 5 once the season starts. We'll have our pre and post games going on as well. So make sure you are following and liking and subscribing to everything OBR. Brad Ward will be back with you next week on the React. As Pete said, stay tuned. Tonight, we're going to hang out with one of our buddies, Cleveland sports reporter Hayden Grove is going to jump on with us. We're going to talk probably Browns Guardians, just hang out with Hayden for a little bit. So stay tuned at 9 o'clock for Garage Beers Live. But that's going to do it for the React. For Pete Smith, go follow him online at _Pete Smith _ I'm Garage Beers Mike. And we will see you next week for the React. Thanks. Go Browns, everybody.